I want to link what you said earlier about economic empowerment, the electoral process, and this whole issue of corruption. And one of the things that people talk about when they say, look, one way of empowering the people, a large group of people are in this group, is where the whole issue of the minimum wage comes up. Yeah. And the reports are that governors first offered a figure that was lower than what the tripartite committee suggested to the government. And then there was a caveat, because in this same chair you're sitting was Governor Nyesom Wike, who said that if minimum wage is to be reviewed, then we have to talk about the revenue sharing formula. It does appear from the latest meeting of the National Economic Council that that position is still what the governors, and not the South-South governors, now I'm talking about the Governors Forum, holds on to. First, what do you make about the whole thing about minimum wage? Where do you stand on that? That's one. The second is, do you agree that there's a tie-in between that and this issue of revenue sharing?
In the first instance, is the minimum wage as of today, in all reality, is it good enough? Is it healthy enough? The answer is no. But you also need to tie the minimum wage with the ability of the various arms of government to be able to pay such wages. Because if you have wages to pay and you cannot pay, you begin to owe salaries.
Which is the situation with most states.
Which is the situation with most of the states. Many states are not able to pay wages, no matter what we may say, whether it is management or mismanagement, but it's actually, the fact is that many states are not able to pay the wages. And you do not want to run to a situation where you owe several months, or you begin to get to a situation where you begin to think of reduction in number of workers, because that's not the best thing for now. But the whole truth is that the minimum wage as of today is not something that is a living wage. So that is well known. So the question now is, within the current revenue allocation formula, it is obvious that it's skewed in favor of the federal government, and the states and local governments may not be in a position to be able to meet up. And that is why we have several states still owing salaries. In fact, only recently I had to assist the local government councils in my state to be able to pay the backlog of salaries, both at the council level and the primary school teacher salary. So it's obviously a major issue. So the question, what the governors are now saying is that, yes, it's not that we are averse to the fact that we ought to increase this way, because we know that 18,000 is not good enough. But the question is, we have been clamoring for a review of the revenue allocation formula. Yes, we think that this is the best time to do so. And I think that the federal government on its own, this is the real time that they need to look at those issues, because over several years, all federal governments, both under the PDP and currently, no one has accepted to table a new revenue formula before the National Assembly. The Revenue Mobilization and Fiscal Commission have always placed a proposal or a draft before the government, but they don't present it to the National Assembly. I think this is the time to work it up fast and ask for an increment, not just to the states per se, but also to the local government councils.
But there has to be a review. At the stage at which you reach, there's also the question of the local governments, which you mentioned.
Yes.
And you talked about, for example, in your state, having to help them out.
Yes, yes.
There's also the sub-issue of local government autonomy, which would then free them to pursue projects that may then enable them generate revenue.
Agree.
But you agree, but it would appear as if most of your colleagues don't, because they want the local governments to be under their control.
No, first, let me just conclude on the minimum wage. The real truth is that there has to be a review of the revenue formula in favor of states and local governments, for them to be able to ensure that when the new minimum wage is adopted through legislation, that they have all states now, we have the capacity to pay, and all local governments will have the capacity to pay. We need to ensure that this is structured out. I have always been a firm believer, as a person, and even as governor, that there is a need to give autonomy to local governments. I believe in it. But some other of my colleagues do not believe in it. Everybody has its own reasons. Probably because I have been a local government council chairman in the past.
That was going to make reference to that.
And I believe truly that they ought to be autonomous on their own and to be able to run their processes on their own. But I know that many local government councils are not able to survive, particularly in the south states. In my state, if you want to grant autonomy to the local governments themselves now and they look at the financial situation, they may not wish that autonomy to come because they know that they are going to run into a lot of problems and they may not even be able to pay their salaries. But I believe in it because it will lead to healthy competitions. And I'm not saying that they could not be regulated, but let them have a reasonable level of autonomy where they are able to perform on their own and to test their capacity to be able to bring development and to reach out to the people. But I think it's very important that we look at the revenue issues. It's very important, it's very core. And then in looking at the entire process, it's also important that we also look at the various salary increments that we have had in the past and find out whether we have run in the right direction. Because what I've seen in salary reviews is that we are talking about minimum wage, which means we're actually talking about those at the lower rung. But many times, when these increments are made, you just have peanuts being given to those at the lower rung. And those at the middle level upwards have the huge chunk. So in actual sense, we're not directly addressing the issues of inadequacy of money or funds on the hands of those we ought to address. It must be done in such a way that it is skewed in favor of those from levels 1 to level 7. And then it should be such a situation where it now tapers down from there, the increment, to those at the top. But if you go and check everyone done in the past, it is the other way around. A little chip is given to those who ought to benefit more, and the huge chunk is given to those who should benefit less. At the end, we would have ended up not addressing the issue which we set out to address. And I believe that it's not the question of the, for my colleagues, that it's not the question of the 30,000 that is important. But a situation where you want to extrapolate it by percentage across the ladder, then it's not good because some will be having an increment of 200,000, whereas the person you ought to have addressed this issue is having an increment of just 12,000. That ought not to be. So there must be a process worked out in which the actual beneficiaries are, actually will be more in those within the lower class. And then only would we have addressed the issue of minimum wage increment.
Now, of course, it would appear as if that's the direction the federal government is thinking of when it says after the committee set up finishes its work, there will have to be a review of the salaries of those who are already earning above.
No, I think they're actually looking at specific agencies where they're earning above. But in the generality of the agents, more of the ministries, departments, and agencies will not be affected by that review. So they need to look at this review process in such a manner that actually we will be satisfied in ourselves that we have actually addressed those level of Nigerians who are most pained by the current salaries that we earn.
Now, let me bring you to the South-South and home to Delta. In Delta State itself, there are always apprehensions when elections come up like this because the people in Delta State, to use the phrase, are very passionate. You're having challenge this time, political challenges. One of your brothers left for the ruling party, your predecessor, in fact, left for the ruling party, and then you have Chief Okowa. The president was in Delta. The national chairman of the ruling party is from the South-South. I'm giving this contextual background to say, look, what you are facing now appears to be more of a challenge than what you faced in 2015. How are you meandering through that?
In the first instance, the political terrain in Delta State is not really changed. All we seek and demand is a free and fair process. In a free and fair process, I'll win landslides because I know that I'm in touch with my people and the partnership between me and the people is real. It's not a question of the rallies that we just see just at the moment, or people shouting about the election. It's about your connect with the locals and how much you relate with them. I've related with the people a lot, not just through infrastructure, through our superior health policies, our education policy, the peace building efforts that we have put in place, and the desire of Deltans to have an equitable process in which we can sit down together and say Delta State belongs to everybody. This is very important. And I do believe that Deltans realize that I have a good knowledge of what Delta State is and what they need. And I've related with them very closely, far beyond previous administrations. Because I came up under the tutelage of somebody, James Ibori, who had a way of connecting with the people. I've taken the best from that and added to it, and I connect strongly with the people. I have held several town hall meetings with stakeholders, moving from local government to local government, so we understand ourselves. So it's not about the person who rules and the people being ruled. It's a question of partnership, and that is why you begin to see a Delta State that is likely very peaceful, where people are talking about Delta and not talking about ethnicity. But while we are in that picture, we are also in a position to talk about the fact that in a family, if there's a process that has been started, it ought to finish. A process that guarantees peace, that guarantees equity and fairness. That, yes, we have 3 senatorial districts. One senatorial district has had its turn. The second one has had its turn. At the 3rd election in 2015, with all the troubles that came in, God threw me up and I emerged through the votes of the people. It's only fair that that process be allowed the way it ought to be.
What you mean
and
is
a lot
that
of,
no, what you mean is that you came from the 3rd senatorial
yes, of course,
zone.
3rd senatorial district. And a lot of our people across the 3 senatorial districts believe that this is just fair and that is justiciable for it to be. That is that. But beyond that, I do not want to pride myself, but in terms of capacity and commitment to the Delta dream, I believe that I score very high. I do not want to comment about the candidates of the other parties, but in terms of
you can't avoid commenting about them. You really can't.
But in terms of good knowledge of governance, in terms of integrity, in terms of exposure and experiences in various sectors, I think I'm much better positioned, and Deltans know that. I've just been possibly a very lucky man, the grace of God. I've been at the council level, both as Secretary of Council and an elected local government council chairman. I've been commissioner. I've been secretary to the state government. I have, by God's grace, been a senator, and I've returned to be governor. I've had a lot of exposures, and that has helped us as a state. In a very challenging time, at the time that I came in, with the kind of situation that I did meet, with the kind of challenge and a distorted system that I did meet, I do believe that those experiences played a lot of role to help us stabilize Delta and to be able to put up a team that could help us stabilize Delta. Those experiences helped me to connect with traditional institutions, the religious class, the youth directly. Because you need to have an understanding of a people to be able to preside over them. The youth in Delta are possibly not like the youth that you find in some other states. Yes, they are like the youth you find in the South-South. They are knowledgeable, they agitate for their rights, and they can do all kinds of things if you do not connect with them. And I do know that we have been able to connect with them strongly. They bought into the peace process. They understand that working together we can develop our state and help to grow ourselves through the various entrepreneurs that we're growing, through various assistance that we're also giving to them. And I believe that their belief in my person is strong, very strong. So outside the issues of equity, if we're talking about capacity and competence, there is no doubt that the other candidate will not be able to measure up with me. There's no doubt about that. So all we seek is a free and fair process, and I don't think I will have any challenge. I don't like to comment much about my immediate past.
He's a member of your family. He's a member of the family.
Yeah, he's a member of the Ibori political class, but he decided to exit on his own. And he knows the implication of that, of exiting from this family. But whether the process was fair or not, I do not know. But I do know that that same family
he did speak very well of you. He did speak very well of you, because at the situation, he said, look, we tried very hard.
Yes.
In 2015, we worked together after the initial disagreement to win the election. We won the election, and subsequently we tried further to see how we could accommodate each other. Of course, it's never easy when you have two gladiators. I mean, we've seen the experience in several other places. But he then said, well, he had to.
Yes, that one saying that he's moved out, but the situation that the Boris family is still very strong. And the greater majority of people have remained strong in the Boris family. I'm not saying a few persons have not moved out, but is the number of persons that have moved out, is it going to be enough to impact negatively on that family? The answer is no. We are strong grassroots politicians, and we continue to propel that strength on ground. And it is our hope that Deltans will speak at the right time. I have always been a grassroots politician from the beginning. Thank God I started from the local government system, and that helped to build me up. And they will work hard, but it's just a question of trying. But I think we're on course. We're on course, very much on course.
Let me ask you this, though. Now, there is the issue of the return. The historical background suggests that there was the issue of militancy over the issue of resource control, the allocation of resources to the area to ameliorate the issue of pollution and environmental degradation and all that. And the youths, who you mentioned earlier on, took up this fight and became actually very militant in it. At one point, stopping Nigeria's oil exports by a very great degree before the late President Yar'Adua brought about the amnesty program. But it does appear as if some aspects of the program have fallen by the wayside. At least that's the perception that is created in the mind. And the youth in many instances now are saying, look, what we agreed is not what is being done, and therefore we may have to return to what we were doing before this agreement took place. Now, you're one of those who will be majorly affected by this, if indeed the matter is not tackled. What do you make of what's going on?
In the first instance, the Niger Delta will always continue to remain apprehensive of the issues of resource control or resource allocation. Because from the beginning they had fought for resource control, and that meant that they needed to be in control of their resources while they pay tax to the federal government. That was the initial struggle. But we moved out of that, and President Yar'Adua, the late President Yar'Adua, actually took us to a level. And even in trying to settle out with the ex-agitators, I prefer to call them instead of militants, the fact is that certain programs were put in place. Yes, stipends were paid to people, at least since we are now disengaging them. And a few of them were sent for training overseas. The progression of the program is such that it's like it remains static. And that is not the extent to which they were supposed to go. He had the line of action, but of course, they took him. And I think that we need to look at that and begin to find out what do we do. Those who have been trained in the course of sending them out in various aspects, and now they have returned home, what are they doing? Was there a process put in place to engage them? I think the answer is no. So many of them have come from outside, they've just come back into the job market. So the question is that, what are such persons likely to do? Will they get frustrated and return back to the creeks? We pray they would not. But do we just set people out, you just send them out for training, they come back, they're just there losing the market, there's no job for them to do. The trainings may have been in such a manner that they are not able to start up on their own. And you also know that for those who even have the technical know-how and the entrepreneurship spirit, it's not easy for somebody from a university or from a technical school to access funds like you have in other climes. It's not easy for them to access funds just easily to be able to start up on their own. So there's a lot of frustration that is beginning to grow. And even for those who were placed on allowances, there was also supposed to be a gradual process in which we begin to re-engage them through various entrepreneurial programs. I don't think we have gone in that state. We've just slowed down totally. So somebody remains in the house, he gets an allowance. Over time, you make that person just a lazy man. Yes, the allowance is helping at a time, but he's looking forward to becoming somebody who is able to hold on to himself and be able to hold on to a family. So there are gaps. So I think that there is a need to study this all over again. And while I'm professing that we continue to pay the allowances because you cannot disengage them, but there must be a process to equip them with some know-how that will enable them stand up as men and be able to hold on to their families. That particular aspect of it, nothing has really been done in that direction. And for those who are coming out, if we send people out, pilots, welders of various, we need to find out as they are coming in, we begin to plan the process of engagement, either working with the oil companies or working with the organized private sector. We need to find placements for them. And for those who cannot get direct placement, is there a way of working out processes with banks to be able to give them loan money at reasonable rates, structured rates, in such a way that they can survive the process and help to put up a process of mentorship, monitoring and mentorship that will enable them grow? Because that's something that also goes wrong in the Nigerian public. We say, oh, we're there, we're engaging youth. But there's no process of monitoring and mentorship. Not just monitoring and mentorship, to help them stand in case they have challenges, to help intervene, to help link them up to markets, to help solve their problems when they have those teething problems as entrepreneurs. We don't do that. So there are lots of issues that are still wrong.
Would moving the oil companies, their headquarters, because there's always been that agitation as well, that most of the people who are doing the exploration, for example, of the Niger Delta, their headquarters, the main buildings, the principal investments they have, are in Lagos or in other parts of the country, not in the area where they are doing, not in the environment where they're actually doing the exploration. Do you think if that were done, if those companies moved their headquarters to the Niger Delta areas, some of what you are talking about in terms of this process of following the amnesty through to the end could actually be viable?
It will help create a lot of good. It's very important. In fact, it's the Nigerian nation and the oil industry as it is today is skewed against those who truly lay the eggs. And it's not good. Because in the first instance, it's unfair for companies who produce all their oils from the 9 oil producing states, with 6 of them and the principal producers coming from the South region. And almost all the companies have their headquarters in Lagos, some in Abuja. And then the few left are still thinking, because if they, oh, you've not done anything to this, so they also want to move for comfort's sake. And it's a very wrong thing. And I think the federal government needs to take an action in this regard. Because if the oil companies live with the people, it creates a better interaction with the people. It creates some economic activity around the people. Then you have to grow the economy of the people. And the partnerships will become stronger. And when the partnership becomes stronger, the peace process is actually encouraged.
Your Excellency, thank you very much for your time.
Thank you
so much. Speaking with you.
Thank you.